This video will demonstrate creating our first program in Alice. To do so, we'll follow the user story of Alice and the White Rabbit. In the story, nouns will correspond to objects, and verbs will correspond to methods. We need to set the stage by adding objects to our program corresponding to the story. When the program begins, Alice and the White Rabbit are facing each other, Alice on the left and the White Rabbit on the right. This storyboard sketch shows us how we want to place our characters. We'll recreate this in Alice. To start a new world, we'll select the grass world from the blank slates category and select OK. One thing we need to set up the first time is the programming language. This is in the Windows, Preference, Programming Language. Make sure that Java is selected. Now we're ready to add our objects to the world. This is done in the Setup Scene button on the top left. When we press this, the whole screen will change. In this screen, we can add objects to our world. We're looking for two objects in the biped class. So let's go down and select the biped classes. And as I scroll over here, I can see to the left and to the right all of the objects in this class. So I see Alice is all the way on the left here. Alice is a special kind of character, actually has an option. So when I click on New Alice, I have one that is styled with a certain kind of dress and another one that's styled with a Wonderland style of dress. So I'll click on this. We get a pop-up box with some information, and we don't need to change anything right now, and we'll press OK. So Alice is added to the world. We can see Alice shows up now in the object tree in the top left. Now I'm ready to add the White Rabbit. Another way to browse for objects is by searching. So I can go to the search gallery and I could type in rabbit. And I see here the White Rabbit is one of them. So another way to add something to the world is to drag. So I click and drag into the world and I can see a wireframe showing up. So I'm going to place the White Rabbit to the right, corresponding with the scene. And I'll let go. We have the same information pop up. We could change the name if we wanted to, but we'll leave it as it is. And now the White Rabbit is in the scene. We can change to the starting camera view with this drop-down box. And we see that they're a little bit off-centered. So following the rule of thirds, I want to move them around. If I click and drag the character right now, I currently have rotation selected. If I select different options on the right-hand side, for example, default will let me drag it around. So we're going to put Alice over here, and then I can drag the White Rabbit this way. And I want them to be facing each other. So I'm going to select the rotation again, and I can drag the characters so they're facing each other. Good, that looks pretty good. And I think we wanted to maybe make Alice a little bit bigger, so I can resize her as well if I wanted. That looks good. Down here we can move the camera around. So I want to move the camera up a little bit, so I'm just going to move that up a little bit. So I've got the stage set. I'll go back to editing the code with this Edit Code button. And I'm ready to start adding some methods. We see in this right-hand side my first method, and there's a placeholder drop statements here. So let's go look at what has to happen in the scene. Here's our user story again. Alice turns her head and greets us. The White Rabbit also turns, etc. And we can turn this into a program flow, which is our algorithm. Here's our flow. So first, Alice turns her head towards the user. Then Alice greets the user, and so forth. So we're going to use this as our algorithm in Alice. So we're ready to start adding methods to our program. To do this, I first need to select Alice's head, which is in this drop-down box. I can follow the right arrow to the getHead method. which will then let me do some operations. So what I want it to do is have the head turn towards the camera. Let's try this point at method. The way I add it is I press the mouse down and drag it into my first method, and when I let go, it asks me what target I want to point at. I'm going to select the camera. Now let's see if this works. So I can press the run button in order to test my program. Good, so Alice turned towards the camera. If you missed it, you can press the restart button. Let's keep adding some things. I want Alice to now greet us, so she has to say, hello there. And I can do this by selecting Alice and finding the say method. So here's the say method. I'll drag this over, and I'm going to select a custom text string. So now we can test again, and it works. So I'm going to select the white rabbit from this box, and I will have him turn to face. Let's try this method. The camera. We test it again. So far so good. Now the white rabbit will say something. So we can add a few more statements in here. Whoops, I dragged an extra statement over for Alice. Well, let me select something for hello. And if I don't want this, I can delete it by right-clicking on the little textured area and selecting delete. What I wanted to do was have the white rabbit say something. So each of these statements happens one after the other. This is the do and order construct. The last thing I want to happen is both of them should say together, welcome to our world. We can do this with the do together option, which is down at the bottom. We'll learn more about the rest of these later. So I can drag up a do together and let go. And I can drop some statements in here and they'll happen at the same time. So the white rabbit will say, welcome to our world. And also Alice will say, welcome to our world. So we run this again, and what should happen is each of these statements should happen one at a time, and then these last two should happen together. Welcome to our world. So after this, say we want the white rabbit to disappear. I can select the white rabbit, go down to the set opacity method, which is the appearance, and drag this over. And I can set the opacity to 0, which will mean that he becomes invisible. So if we run this again, at the end we'll see him fade away and become invisible. There he goes, fades away. One thing we can do in almost all of these is add some extra options. So the default duration on most of the methods is 1 second, and we notice that the white rabbit took 1 second to fade away. I could make this longer if I wanted, or actually I could make it instant if I made it 0. And the way I can make it 0 is entering a custom number. Just type in 0. And now at the end, the white rabbit should just disappear immediately. And he blinked away. Feel free to play around with the durations or some of the other options, for example, the font color or the bubble fill color on some of these texts. Make sure to save your work and remember where you saved your file. Good luck.